Usually, like, when you picture the collapse of a massive, centuries-old institution, you imagine an earthquake, right?
Oh, yeah, like a sudden catastrophic rupture where the walls just come tumbling down all at once.
Exactly. You think of a specific day where, everything was totally fine, and then the next day, it's just all rubble.
Right, a clear, undeniable moment of destruction. I mean, everyone feels the ground shake. It's dramatic. It's instantaneous.
But, well, when you actually look at the fall of the Roman Republic, that whole earthquake model just completely falls apart.
It really does. It's totally inaccurate.
Yeah, we are looking at a political landscape that is eroding, just slowly, almost invisibly over decades.
Yeah, it's structural rot.
Right. It happens until one guy walks up, pushes on a load-bearing wall, and a 500-year-old superpower just turns to dust in front of everyone's eyes.
It is the absolute definition of institutional decay. I mean, it really is.
And the man who finally pushed that wall over, Gaius Julius Caesar, he understood exactly how fragile that structure had become.
Oh, he saw it clearly. While everyone else was pretending it was still made of solid marble.
Exactly. So today, we are doing a deep dive into the life, the conquests, and the incredibly complex legacy of that exact man.
Which is such a massive topic.
It is. And we are going to try to cut through 2,000 years of, Hollywood myth-making, Shakespearean drama, and ancient propaganda.
Because the propaganda is heavy with this one.
So heavy. We want to examine the historical reality of a man whose ambition was just so vast, his very name became synonymous with absolute power.
Right. And for you listening, I mean, this isn't just a recount of ancient history.
Not at all.
This is a masterclass in ambition, psychological warfare, public relations, and the actual day-to-day mechanics of how a free republic gets dismantled.
And that last part is so crucial.
Oh.
Like, we think we know Caesar, right?
Yeah, we've all seen the marble bust, the comb over, the laurel wreath.
Right, the whole aesthetic. But the real man, operating within the highly volatile, partisan environment of 1st century BC Rome, is infinitely more fascinating than the caricature.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, the tactics he used to gain leverage, to manipulate public perception, and to corner his political enemies, those mechanics haven't disappeared.
No, not at all.
The technology has changed, obviously, but the playbook is remarkably similar today.
Okay, so let's unpack this playbook. And I feel like we have to start at the beginning, which ironically for a guy who ended up ruling the known world, is a story of being a massive underdog.
It really is. It's not the start you'd expect.
No, so he was born around July 12th or 13th in 100 BC into a family called the gens Julia.
Right, the Julia.
They were patricians, which meant they were the old nobility. But I guess my question is, what does it actually mean to be a patrician in Rome at this specific time?
Well, especially one from a family whose political influence had, seriously waned over the years.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what was their actual status?
It's a really fascinating paradox. I mean, to be a patrician meant your family traced its lineage back to the founding of Rome itself.
So they were the elite of the elite.
Technically, yes. You were the ultimate old money. Except, in the case of the Julii, they were kind of without the money part.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had immense social prestige, but they totally lacked the immediate political leverage and the financial capital that really drove the Roman Republic at the time.
So they had the name, but not the bank account.
Exactly. I mean, they had produced a consul here and there over the centuries, but they weren't the heavy hitters dominating the Senate.
Right, they weren't running the show.
No, but what they lacked in cash, they made up for with a truly unbelievable, incredibly arrogant origin story.
I love this detail so much. It's so wild.
It's so arrogant.
They didn't just claim they were there when Rome was founded. They claimed they immigrated to Italy from Alba Longa back in, like, the 7th century BC.
Right.
And they traced their direct descent from Julius, who was the son of the Trojan hero Aeneas.
And Aeneas, according to the mythology, was the son of the goddess Venus.
Wait, so they are walking around the forum subtly, or maybe not so subtly, reminding everyone that they are literally descended from a divine being.
Oh, absolutely. It was their entire brand.
It's like being born into a minor, forgotten branch of a modern royal family,
Yeah, that's a perfect way to look at it.
You have the incredibly fancy hyphenated last name. You have the portraits of your ancestors in some crumbling estate.
Right, the prestige is there.
And you have this divine origin story, but you have zero actual cash to fund a political campaign.
Which is exactly what you needed in Rome.
And no real leverage to get things done. You're basically just living on fumes and prestige.
Completely. And just to clear up a common myth right out of the gate here.
Oh, the C-section thing.
Yeah, there is absolutely no historical evidence he was born via cesarean section.
None at all.
None. The medical realities of 100 BC meant that that procedure was almost universally fatal for the mother.
Right. It was a last resort.
Exactly. But his mother, Aurelia, was a major guiding force in his life, and she lived for decades after his birth.
Okay, so the myths literally start attaching themselves to him from day one.
Pretty much, yeah. But what his immediate family lacked in wealth, they tried to make up for in highly strategic marriages.
Right, because networking was everything.
It was. So his aunt, Julia, married a man named Gaius Marius.
And Marius was a big deal, right?
Marius was a massive figure. He was a new man, which meant he didn't come from old nobility, but he became one of the most powerful military reformers and generals of the whole era.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he held the consulship an unprecedented 7 times.
7 times. That's insane for Rome.
It was unheard of. And Caesar himself, when he was just a teenager, married Cornelia, who was the daughter of Lucius Cornelius Cinna.
Okay, and this is where, like, the political earthquake metaphor really starts to rumble, I feel like.
Oh, absolutely.
Because Cinna and Marius weren't just random politicians. They represented a very specific political faction in Rome.
Right, they were populists.
Right, and they relied on the popular assemblies and the common people, which put them in direct, violent opposition to the conservative aristocracy in the Senate.
Which is a very dangerous game to play.
Because Rome was literally tearing itself apart in civil wars long before Caesar ever crossed the Rubicon.
Oh, it was a bloodbath. It really was.
How bad did it get?
Well, a conservative general named Sulla essentially wins this generational civil war. He takes the city of Rome by force in 82 BC and just makes himself dictator.
Just marches in and takes over.
Yep. And Sulla represents the old aristocratic order, right? So he immediately starts purging his political enemies.
On prescriptions?
Exactly. He issues prescription lists. He is literally posting the names of citizens in the forum on a board.
That is terrifying.
It is state-sponsored terrorism. If your name was on the list, your property was confiscated, your descendants were barred from public office forever. And worst of all, anyone could murder you in the street and claim a cash reward.
It's literally a hit list for the entire city. And suddenly, young teenage Caesar, just because of his aunt's marriage to Marius and his own marriage to Cinna's daughter, is sitting squarely on the wrong side of a very bloody regime.
Right, he's a target by association.
So what happened?
Well, Sulla looks at this kid and demands a test of loyalty. He orders Caesar to divorce Cornelia.
Just like that.
Yeah. Sulla had already systematically annulled all of Cinna's laws and acts, and he wanted this symbolic family tie severed completely.
Okay, but Caesar has no army, no money, and no real power to speak of.
Nothing. He's just a kid.
Yeah, so he does something genuinely shocking. He refuses.
He really does. He just looks a bloodthirsty dictator in the eye and says no.
That is so bold. I mean, the consequences must have hit him instantly.
Oh, they did. He gets stripped of his priesthood. He had recently been named the Flamen Dialis, which was the high priest of Jupiter.
Which is a massive deal, really.
Huge honor. And he loses it. He loses his inheritance. He loses his wife's dowry. And he is forced to flee Rome into the countryside.
Is running for his life.
Yeah, constantly moving, constantly in hiding from Sulla's death squads.
He actually catches a fever during this time, right?
He does, and he's so sick, he actually has to bribe a bounty hunter just to look the other way so he isn't killed in his bed.
That is so wild. So how does he even survive?
He only survives because his mother's well-connected relatives and the Vestal Virgins, who were the most sacred priestesses in Rome, personally intervene and beg Sulla to spare his life.
And there's a very famous story attached to this exact moment, isn't there?
Yes. Supposedly, when Sulla finally relented and agreed to pardon Caesar, he warned those who begged for him, saying, "Keep him if you must, but know that in this young man I see many Mariuses."
Meaning, like, he saw a dangerous populist revolutionary in the making.
Exactly.
Okay, wait, hold on. We always hear that quote in movies and books, but is that actually true?
I'm glad you asked.
Like, did Sulla really possess some kind of prophetic vision about an 18-year-old kid? Or is that just ancient historical fan fiction written after the fact?
It's almost certainly apocryphal.
I knew it!
Yeah, it's a classic piece of the Caesar myth. The biographers who wrote that down, guys like Plutarch and Suetonius, were writing decades or even over a century later.
So they knew how the story ended.
Exactly. They knew exactly how the story ended, and ancient biographers loved foreshadowing greatness.
Right, they had to make it seem destined.
Plus, historical records show that Sulla, for all his brutality against the populace, never actually executed any fellow patricians during his purges.
Oh, really? He spared the old nobility.
Mostly, yes. So the idea that he recognized this specific broke patrician teenager as a unique, apocalyptic threat to the entire republic is highly, highly unlikely.
Okay, so the dramatic quote is probably fake, but the trauma of the experience was incredibly real.
Absolutely real and completely foundational for him. This was Caesar's political education.
Trial by fire.
Literally. I mean, think about the lesson he just absorbed. He had a sacred ancient priesthood. He had aristocratic rights.
He had the bloodline.
Exactly. And the Roman Republic had this complex, centuries-old constitution that was designed specifically to prevent tyranny.
Right.
And none of it mattered. Not one bit.
Wow.
Sulla had an army, and therefore Sulla made the rules. Sulla could strip away your wealth, your career, and your life with just a snap of his fingers.
So Caesar learned early, like in his bones, that traditional constitutional norms were essentially just a polite fiction when they were confronted with raw military force.
Precisely.
That is a chilling realization for a brilliant young guy. I mean, if the rules don't protect you, the only way to be safe is to be the one making the rules.
Exactly. You either hold the sword or you're at the mercy of it.
Interestingly, though, losing that priesthood was actually kind of a blessing in disguise, wasn't it?
Oh, massive blessing. The Flamen Dialis had these insane religious taboos attached to it.
Like what?
Well, he wasn't allowed to touch metal, he couldn't ride a horse, he couldn't look at an army, and he couldn't spend a single night outside the city of Rome.
Wait, so if he had kept that job, his career would have been totally paralyzed?
Completely. You can't be a Roman general if you can't look at an army or ride a horse.
Right. So instead, stripped of the priesthood, he is finally free to leave Italy.
Yeah, he heads east to Asia to serve on the military staff of a provincial governor.
And this is where he has to start building his brand completely from scratch.
Stripped of his family wealth, yeah, he had to build his resume the hard way. His time in the East is pivotal.
What happens there?
Well, in 81 BC, he participates in the siege of Mytilene, and he ends up winning the civic crown.
Now, this wasn't just a participation trophy, right?
Not at all. The civic crown was a wreath made of oak leaves awarded for personally saving the life of a fellow Roman citizen in the absolute midst of battle.
Oh, wow. So he was in the thick of it.
He was. It was one of the highest military decorations in the Republic.
That's a huge PR win for him.
It was. And it came with immense, tangible social perks. When a holder of the civic crown entered the theater in Rome, even the senators were expected to stand up in respect.
Just for walking in the room.
Yes. And he was allowed to wear it at all public occasions. For a young patrician who was obsessed with restoring his family's lost dignity, it was a taste of public adulation that he would never, ever lose his appetite for.
But this same period in the East also generates his very first major PR crisis.
Ah, yes. The rumor regarding the king of Bithynia.
Yeah. Can we talk about this?
Yeah.
Because it's fascinating.
We definitely should. So Caesar was sent to the court of King Nicomedes V of Bithynia to gather a fleet of ships for the Roman military.
Right, like an envoy mission.
Exactly. He spent a significant amount of time there, and almost immediately, his political enemies back in Rome started a rumor that he was having a passive homosexual affair with the king.
And to understand why this was such an incredibly damaging smear at the time, you have to understand how the Romans viewed sexuality, which is very different from modern frameworks.
Oh, totally different. The Romans didn't categorize sexuality strictly by gender in the way modern society often does.
How do they see it?
They viewed it almost entirely through the lens of power, dominance, and social status.
Okay.
To take the active, penetrating role in a sexual encounter was considered masculine and dominant, regardless of the partner's gender.
Right, so that was acceptable for a Roman man.
Yes. But to take the passive role was viewed as a sign of submission, weakness, or inferiority.
I see.
So spreading a rumor that Caesar was the passive partner to a foreign king wasn't just a juicy scandal, it was a targeted political weapon designed to emasculate him.
They were basically calling him the Queen of Bithynia, right?
Yeah.
Implying he was subservient to a non-Roman monarch.
Exactly. Caesar fiercely denied it under oath for his entire life. But the smear, it just dogged him forever.
Stuck around.
Oh yeah. Decades later, during his massive triumphal parades in Rome, his own veteran soldiers were still jokingly singing songs about it as they marched behind him.
It just shows you that weaponized political mudslinging is a very, very old invention.
Human nature hasn't changed much.
Truly. But he doesn't let the rumors stop him. He eventually leaves the military and decides to travel to Rhodes, right? To study rhetoric.
Right, to become a better public speaker, which was essential for a political career in Rome.
But on the way, his ship is captured by Cilician pirates. And this is one of the most famous stories of his youth.
It's legendary. The pirates take him captive, and they demand a ransom of 20 talents of silver.
Now, what does Caesar do?
According to the legend, Caesar just laughs in their faces. He tells them they clearly don't know who they've kidnapped and demands they ask for 50 talents because he's worth far more.
He negotiates his own ransom up. It's such a flex.
It's ridiculous.
And then while he's waiting for his associates to gather the silver, he just hangs out with the pirates, right?
Yeah, he treats them like his personal bodyguards.
He writes poetry and speeches, reads it to them, and when they don't appreciate his literary genius, he literally calls them illiterate savages to their faces.
He was entirely fearless.
He would jokingly promise them that as soon as he was freed, he was going to come back and crucify every single one of them.
And the pirates just thought it was hilarious. They thought he was this funny, arrogant kid.
But then, the ransom is paid. He's released. He immediately raises a small fleet, sails back, captures the pirates, takes back his 50 talents, and actually crucifies them, exactly as he promised.
Just like he said he would.
It's wild.
Yeah.
But, I have to ask again, how much of that is real?
It's a fantastic story, but we have to look at it critically again. Modern historians often point out that the 50-talent figure is almost certainly a literary embellishment.
Just to make him look more valuable.
Right. A more sober, contemporary account from the historian Velius Paterculus suggests the pirates were probably just captured and sold into slavery.
Ah, okay. That makes more economic sense.
Exactly. But why does the 50-talent poetry reading, crucifixion story exist at all?
Because he told everyone.
Because Caesar was a masterful curator of his own legend. He understood that perception was reality.
PR again.
Yes. He needed the people of Rome to see him not as a victim who got kidnapped, but as an invincible, bold patrician who was entirely devoid of fear and always in control, even when he was literally in chains.
He's basically writing his own superhero origin story and feeding it to the Roman tabloids.
That's exactly what he's doing.
And he brings that flair for PR right back to Rome. He starts climbing the political ladder, the cursus honor him. By 65 BC, he gets elected as a curule aedile.
Which is a very important stepping stone.
This is a magistracy responsible for the upkeep of public buildings, regulating the markets, and crucially, organizing the massive public games and festivals.
The fun stuff.
Yeah. And this is where his strategy really crystallizes for me. He essentially operates like a modern tech startup focused entirely on rapid user acquisition.
Oh, that's a really great way to think about it. Explain the mechanics of that analogy.
Well, okay, so a modern startup will burn through staggering amounts of venture capital, right? Operating at a massive loss just to offer free services or heavily subsidized products to acquire millions of users.
Hoping they can figure out how to monetize them later.
Exactly. You get the market share first, worry about profits later. Caesar does the exact same thing, but with politics.
He really does.
He uses staggering amounts of borrowed money, borrowed from incredibly wealthy Romans like Crassus, to throw the most lavish, mind-blowing gladiatorial games and public feasts the city had ever seen.
He goes all out?
He plunges himself into catastrophic, life-ruining debt, all to buy the love and the votes of the Roman mob.
He was highly leveraged, just gambling everything on his future earning potential.
But it worked. Right.
It worked brilliantly. But, it wasn't just bread and circuses. He also made highly calculated, deeply symbolic political moves during this time.
Like what?
Well, as aedile, he famously restored the public trophies and monuments of his uncle, Gaius Marius.
Right, because Sulla had completely outlawed the memory of Marius.
Exactly. Sulla had dismantled the monuments celebrating Marius's victories over the Jugurthine and Cymric armies years ago.
So by restoring those monuments, Caesar was sending a very loud, unmistakable signal to the populist faction, right?
He was saying, I am the heir to Marius. I am your guy.
I read that the later biographers claim he did it secretly overnight.
Yeah, they do, which is logistically impossible given the stonemasons and heavy lifting required for those statues.
Right, you can't just quietly erect massive stone monuments in the dark.
No, you can't. But the real brilliance of the act was that he framed it as an exercise in pietas.
What's pietas?
It's the ancient Roman virtue of deep respect and duty to one's family.
Ah, I see.
The conservative Senate hated it, obviously. They knew it was reviving old factional hostilities, but they couldn't exactly pass a law punishing a man for honoring his deceased uncle.
It was a perfectly executed political maneuver.
Yeah.
He weaponized family values against them.
Exactly.
And his gamble pays off massively. In 63 BC, the position of Pontifex Maximus opens up.
The chief priest of Roman state religion.
Right. And this is a lifetime appointment of immense prestige. Caesar runs for it, even though he's young and up against true conservative heavyweights like Quintus Lutatius Catulus and Publius Servilius Caesaricus.
Guys who have been around forever.
Right. And Caesar wins. Now, the ancient commentators immediately cry bribery. Was this just a completely bought election?
Well, it was certainly expensive. The historical records indicate he borrowed even more heavily to finance this campaign.
Adding to his startup debt.
Right. But we should note that no formal charge of bribery was ever successfully laid against him, which implies that money alone doesn't explain the victory.
So why did he win?
He won because he had systematically built a rabid base of popular support with those games. But equally importantly, he was building alliances with men far more powerful than him.
The networking again.
Exactly. If he was throwing money around, a lot of it likely came from his connections to Pompey the Great, Rome's most successful and famous general, whom Caesar had been carefully supporting in the Senate.
So Caesar is making himself indispensable to the heavyweights while cultivating the masses at the same time.
Yes, playing both sides.
But the bill is coming due, isn't it? He is drowning in debt. His creditors are literally threatening to prevent him from leaving for his provincial governorship in Spain because they fear he'll never pay them back.
It was a very real crisis for him.
So to survive, to protect himself from his creditors and his political enemies, Caesar realizes he needs a much bigger stage, and he needs untouchable allies.
Which brings us to the year 60 BC and the formation of a political alliance that would completely short-circuit the Roman constitution.
Right. Modern history calls it the First Triumvirate.
Yes.
An alliance between Caesar, Pompey the Great, and Marcus Licinius Crassus. Now, Crassus was ridiculously, unfathomably rich, right?
Oh, the richest man in Rome. He made a fortune in real estate, fire brigades, and tax farming.
And Pompey was the military hero with tens of thousands of loyal veteran soldiers.
The muscle.
And Caesar had the popular momentum and the political cunning. But I want to pause here because you might be listening to this and wondering, how does an advanced, complex republic with intricate checks and balances just let three guys casually hijack the entire state apparatus?
It's a great question.
Was this triumvirate a formal legal board of directors? Like, did they have an office?
Not at all. The term First Triumvirate is entirely a modern invention. The Romans never called it that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was not a formal office, it wasn't a constitutional body, and it wasn't legally recognized in any way.
So what was it?
It was a fragile, informal, backroom mob pact.
Wow.
It was essentially three very powerful men sitting in a room, realizing that if they just stopped fighting each other and pooled their distinct resources, the Senate simply couldn't stop them.
What did each of them actually want out of this deal? Because they didn't really like each other, did they?
Oh, Pompey and Crassus absolutely hated each other.
Right. So why team up?
Well, Pompey had just returned from conquering the East, and he desperately needed the Senate to pass a land bill to give farms to his retiring veterans.
And the Senate said no.
The Senate was stonewalling him. They didn't want him getting too popular.
Okay. What about Crassus?
Crassus had a network of wealthy tax farming clients in Asia who had overbid on their contracts and were facing financial ruin. He needed the Senate to pass a financial bailout for them.
And the Senate?
The Senate was stonewalling him too.
Okay, so they're both frustrated.
Yeah.
And Caesar?
Caesar needed to win the consulship, the highest elected office in Rome, so he could secure a lucrative military command afterward.
To pay off his massive debts.
Exactly. And to gain legal immunity from the enemies who wanted to prosecute him the second he was out of office.
So it's purely transactional.
100%.
Crassus brings the cash, Pompey brings the muscle and the veterans, and Caesar brings the legislative skill and the popularity to actually force the laws through.
Exactly. They were a perfect, terrifying team.
And they prove exactly how powerful this alliance is in 59 BC when Caesar is elected consul.
He wins just like they planned.
But the conservative establishment in the Senate panics. and they managed to get one of their own guys elected as his co-consul, a staunch conservative named Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus.
Which was the standard Roman defense mechanism. The Roman system always elected two consuls precisely so they could veto each other, preventing one man from taking absolute power.
So what does Caesar do?
Caesar initially tries to play nice, actually. He drafts a very moderate, entirely reasonable land distribution bill for Pompey's veterans, and he brings it to the Senate for a standard debate.
Sounds fair.
And the Senate, led by arch-conservatives like Cato the Younger, refuses to even engage with the substance of the bill.
You just block it.
They just filibuster. Cato literally talks until the sun goes down just to prevent a vote from happening.
And this is where we see the exact mechanism of the Republic's breakdown in real time, because the obstructionism wasn't based on the public good.
Right. They weren't arguing the bill was actually bad for Rome.
They were obstructing it purely because it was Caesar's bill, and they wanted to deny him a political victory.
It was hyper-partisanship completely paralyzing the state. They refused to compromise on anything, which left Caesar with a really stark choice.
What was the choice?
Accept total political defeat and likely financial ruin, or break the norms.
And knowing Caesar.
Yeah, he chose to break the norms. Caesar bypasses the Senate entirely. He takes the legislation directly to the popular assembly, the tribal assembly, to have the people vote on it directly.
But his co-consul Bibulus shows up at the assembly with his tribunes to exercise his constitutional right to veto the proceedings, right?
He tries to.
And what happens next is just a terrifying visual of the Republic turning to dust. The crowd, filled with Pompey's angry veterans, physically attacks Bibulus.
It gets incredibly ugly.
They dump a basket of feces over his head.
Yes.
They beat up his bodyguards, and they physically snap his fasces.
And we should explain the fasces.
Yeah, those are the ceremonial bundles of wooden rods carried by his guards, right?
Yeah.
That symbolized his legal authority and physical inviolability.
Exactly. Snapping them was a huge symbolic desecration. Violence had fully entered the legislative process.
The threat of physical force completely overrode constitutional law.
Completely. Bibulus, humiliated and realizing that his legal veto meant absolutely nothing against a mob of angry veterans, just flees the forum.
Where does he go?
He retreats to his house and literally stays inside for the rest of the entire year.
He just works from home for a year.
Pretty much. He tries to issue edicts from his living room, claiming he is watching the skies for bad omens.
Wait, what does that mean?
According to strict Roman religious law, if a magistrate is watching the skies, no public business can be conducted. So technically, that invalidated every single law Caesar passed that year.
But Caesar just ignored it.
Completely ignored it. He forced through Pompey's land laws, he secured Crassus's tax bailouts.
And the public openly mocked the situation, didn't it?
Oh, ruthlessly. It became a running joke in Rome that documents weren't signed in the consulship of Caesar and Bibulus, but in the consulship of Julius and Caesar.
That is brutal. So Caesar was basically ruling as a de facto autocrat for the year.
He was. But he knew that as soon as his year in office ended, his enemies were going to prosecute him for all this illegal, omen-breaking legislation.
So he needs immunity.
Desperately. So a friendly tribune named Vatinius passes a law giving Caesar exactly what he needs. A 5-year military command, which is later extended to 10.
As the proconsul of Illyricum, Cisalpine Gaul, and Transalpine Gaul.
Right. Having bulldozed the Senate, alienated the establishment, and secured this massive military playground, Caesar now had the stage he needed.
He had legal immunity as long as he commanded an army.
Yes, you couldn't be prosecuted while serving.
And he had regions to his north ripe for conquest to pay off his staggering debts, which launches one of the most famous military campaigns in human history, the Gallic Wars.
A massively consequential war.
Caesar's campaigns in Gaul span from 58 to 50 BC. Now, Gaul, which roughly covers modern-day France, Belgium, and parts of Switzerland, was not a single unified nation.
No, not at all. It wasn't France. It was a patchwork of dozens of distinct, often warring Celtic and Germanic tribes.
And Caesar exploited those divisions brilliantly. He didn't just march in and declare war on everyone at once.
That would have been suicide.
Right. He constantly found pretexts to intervene. When the Helvetii tribe attempted a mass migration through Roman allied territory, Caesar attacked them to, quote, protect Rome's borders.
Right. It was always framed as defensive.
When the Belgae formed a coalition in the north, Caesar marched against them, claiming they were a preemptive threat. He systematically picked off the tribes, pitting them against each other until he had subjugated almost the entire region.
But he didn't just win standard pitched battles. He executed these massive, almost theatrical engineering flexes.
Oh man, the engineering. The one that always blows my mind is the bridge over the Rhine.
It's unbelievable.
In 55 BC, a Germanic tribe is causing trouble, so Caesar decides he needs to cross the Rhine River into Germany. But the Rhine is deep, it's wide, and it has a very fast current.
It's a major, formidable river.
Instead of just finding boats, Caesar commands his legions to build a massive wooden bridge.
And we really have to delve into the mechanics of this because it perfectly illustrates Roman military superiority.
How did they even do it?
His engineers built pile drivers out of logs and literally pounded massive timber pylons directly into the fast-flowing riverbed. They did it at an angle to brace against the current.
While the river is rushing past them.
Yes, they spanned the entire river with a complex wooden trestle bridge in just 10 days.
10 days for an entire bridge across the Rhine.
It's an insane logistical achievement. He marches his entire army across into Germany. He spends about 18 days burning a few villages and exploring, then marches his army back across to Gaul, and then completely dismantles the bridge behind him.
Wait, why tear it down? He gained no territory.
Because it was pure psychological warfare.
Really?
Yes. He wanted to prove to the Germanic tribes and to the political operators back in Rome that Rome, and specifically Julius Caesar, could project power anywhere, at any time, and nature itself couldn't stop him.
He was flexing on nature.
Basically, yes.
And he does the same thing with Britain, right? He launches 2 invasions of the island of Britain.
Which was huge news in Rome.
Because to the Romans at the time, Britain wasn't just another country. It was like the edge of the known universe.
It was a mythical island of mists and monsters to them.
He doesn't conquer it, but the sheer fact that he went there and came back alive made him a living legend in the streets of Rome.
And he made absolute sure that everyone in Rome knew exactly what he was doing by publishing the Commentari de Bello Gallico, his famous commentaries on the Gallic War.
I had to translate those in high school Latin.
Oh, many of us did.
It took me years to realize what they actually were. My analogy for the commentaries is that they read exactly like a modern tech CEO's meticulously crafted quarterly earnings reports, but, for war.
That is precisely what they were. The Senate didn't have 24-hour news networks to see what was actually happening in Gaul.
Right.
So Caesar dispatched these accounts back to Rome annually. They were written in a crisp, elegant, seemingly objective third-person style.
Caesar did this. Caesar ordered that.
Exactly. Which gave them the illusion of impartial historical fact, but they were deeply, deeply partial.
They were PR documents.
They were designed to keep his shareholders, the Roman people, hyped up about the dividends of conquest, while carefully spinning his blunders.
Give me an example of the spin, because he must have messed up sometimes.
Oh, definitely. Take the winter of 54 BC. The Gallic tribes, led by Ambiorix of the Eburones, staged a massive uprising.
Okay.
They tricked a Roman garrison into leaving their fortified winter camp, and they ambushed them in a valley. An entire Roman legion and 5 cohorts, thousands of men were slaughtered.
That is a catastrophic disaster.
It was. And Caesar knew that his conservative critics back in Rome, like Cato, were desperately looking for any excuse to have him stripped of his command and tried for illegal war-making.
So how does he spin a massacre?
In the commentaries, Caesar meticulously details the betrayal of the Gauls and the heroic, albeit doomed, last stand of his officers. He completely deflects the blame from his overall strategic deployment and keeps the narrative intensely focused on Roman bravery and the need for vengeance.
He had to maintain his aura of hyper-competence. It was always someone else's fault, or just unpredictable treachery.
Exactly.
He eventually crushes that uprising. But the war culminates in the ultimate showdown in 52 BC, the Siege of Alesia.
This is a legendary battle.
The Gauls finally unite under a brilliant commander named Vercingetorix. Vercingetorix realizes he can't beat Caesar in open battle, so he retreats into the heavily fortified hilltop city of Alesia with his army.
A very smart defensive move.
Caesar arrives and realizes he can't storm the wall, so he decides to starve them out. He builds a wall around the entire city, but then it gets completely insane.
This is one of the greatest feats of military engineering in history.
Break it down for us.
Caesar builds a line of circumvallation. an inward-facing wall 11 miles long, complete with watchtowers, trenches filled with stakes, and booby traps, just to keep Vercingetorix trapped inside.
11 miles.
Yes, but then Caesar gets word that a massive Gallic relief army, hundreds of thousands strong, is marching to relieve the city.
So he's about to be surrounded.
Right, so what does Caesar do? He orders his men to build a line of contravallation, an outward-facing wall, 13 miles long, surrounding his own army.
He essentially builds a donut of fortifications, and the Roman army is the jelly in the middle.
That's a great visual.
They're besieging a city while simultaneously being besieged themselves.
It's unheard of.
The logistics of just feeding his own men while trapped between two hostile armies are mind-boggling.
It required immense discipline.
But the walls hold, right?
The Roman discipline holds. They repel the massive relief army on the outside, and Vercingetorix, starving on the inside, is forced to ride out in his best armor, throw his weapons at Caesar's feet, and surrender.
And that's it. Gaul is effectively broken and annexed into the Roman Empire.
It was a monumental victory, and it provided Caesar with unimaginable wealth slaves, gold and plunder, which he used to pay off all his debts and buy immense influence in Rome.
But while he was busy writing his own legend in Gaul, the political safety net he had left behind in Rome was completely disintegrating.
It was falling apart fast.
Which takes us to the crisis point, the Rubicon and the collapse of the Republic. The triumvirate, that informal backroom deal, completely shatters.
And it shatters for deeply personal reasons, really.
Right, Caesar's daughter, Julia, who is married to Pompey, dies in childbirth in 54 BC.
That was tragic, and it severed the primary family tie between the two most powerful men in Rome.
And then in 53 BC, Crassus, the incredibly wealthy third leg of the stool, decides he wants military glory to match Caesar and Pompey.
Which was a fatal mistake.
He launches an unprovoked, ill-advised invasion of the Parthian Empire in the east, right?
Yes. He is completely outmaneuvered by Parthian horse archers and killed at the Battle of Car.
Suddenly the balance of power is gone. It's just two titans, Pompey and Caesar, eyeing each other warily.
And the conservative faction in the Senate, men like Cato and Marcellus, they see an opening here.
What do?
They start heavily wooing Pompey. They stroke his ego, they convince him that Caesar's rising popularity is a direct threat to the state, and more importantly, a threat to Pompey's own legacy as Rome's greatest hero.
They turn them against each other.
Exactly. By 50 BC, Pompey has completely realigned with the conservative establishment.
And the Senate makes their move. They order Caesar to lay down his military command, disband his legions, and return to Rome as a private citizen.
Which brings us to January 49 BC.
Caesar is stationed in northern Italy with a single veteran legion, the 13th. The boundary between his province of Gaul and Italy proper is a small, muddy river called the Rubicon.
A very insignificant river geographically, but legally massive.
Because Roman law strictly forbade any general from leading a standing army across that border into Italy, right?
Doing so was a direct declaration of war against the state.
We always hear the dramatic framing of this moment. He pauses at the river, quotes the Greek playwright Menander, and says, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast, and marches his troops across.
The point of no return.
But wait, let's look at the real motivation here. We are taught that Caesar crossed the Rubicon because the Senate backed him into a corner. He was going to be prosecuted for the illegal laws he passed during his consulship 10 years prior.
That's the standard narrative, yes.
If he went back without his army, he'd be destroyed. But was he actually facing certain ruin? Or is that just an excuse for a blatant, power-hungry military coup?
It's a debate that historians still argue over today, honestly. But when you look closely at the mechanics of Roman justice at the time, a successful prosecution against Caesar was actually quite unlikely.
Really? Why?
Well, he possessed massive popular support among the voting public, for one, and he had enough plundered Gallic wealth to bribe any jury in Rome 10 times over.
Right. He was loaded now.
Furthermore, during the standoff, Caesar had offered several compromises, including offering to give up his command if Pompey simultaneously gave up his.
You don't offer to disarm if you are terrified of a guaranteed conviction in court.
Exactly.
So if it wasn't just fear of a trial, why plunge the entire Mediterranean world into a bloody civil war?
To understand Caesar's decision, you have to understand the core psychological driver of the Roman aristocrat. Dignitas.
Dignitas.
Yes. This translates roughly to honor, status, prestige, and your perceived public worth.
It was everything to them.
It was. If Caesar returned as a private citizen, even if he wasn't convicted in court, his enemies would control the political machinery.
So they would just ice him out.
Yes. They could reject his candidacy for a second consulship, They could deny him his triumph, the grand victory parade for his conquests in Gaul. They could permanently sideline him.
He believed his enemies were using constitutional technicalities to humiliate him and to suppress the liberty of the Roman people to elect him.
In his mind, yes.
He simply could not stomach the humiliation of being subordinated to men he viewed as his political and intellectual inferiors.
Precisely. The Civil War was, at its very heart, a massive cataclysmic escalation over one man's dignitas, his political future, and his absolute refusal to be diminished.
The die was cast. He crosses the river. But winning this civil war wouldn't be easy. It takes Caesar on a desperate high-speed chase across the entire known world.
It really becomes a world war.
Pompey and the conservative senators realize they don't have enough troops mobilized in Italy to stop Caesar's battle-hardened veterans, so they free Rome. They abandon the capital and sail east to Greece to raise a massive army.
Which leaves Italy to Caesar.
Caesar secures Italy without much bloodshed, but he can't chase Pompey immediately, right? Because Pompey's lieutenants control a powerful army in Spain.
Right, he doesn't want to get pinched between two armies.
So Caesar executes a lightning-fast campaign into Spain, defeats the Pompeian forces there at the Battle of Ilerda, secures his rear, and then finally sails across the Adriatic to face Pompey in Greece.
It all comes to a head at the Battle of Pharsalis in 48 BC.
And Pompey has the advantage here, doesn't he?
Oh, Pompey has the high ground, he has a larger army, and he has overwhelming cavalry superiority.
It should have been Pompey's win.
It should have. But Caesar's veteran infantry, the men who survived Gaul, are just too disciplined. They repel Pompey's cavalry charge, the Pompeian lines break, and Pompey's army is decisively crushed.
Pompey runs for his life. He sails to Egypt, hoping the young king Ptolemy XIII will give him sanctuary because Pompey had previously helped Ptolemy's father.
A reasonable hope.
But the Egyptian royal advisors are pragmatic. They see which way the wind is blowing. They decide it's much safer to stay on the good side of the man who just won the war.
They do the brutal calculus.
When Pompey arrives on a small boat, an Egyptian assassin stabs him to death on the beach while his family watches from the ship.
It's an incredibly grim end for one of Rome's greatest heroes.
Caesar arrives in Egypt just days later, in pursuit. The Egyptians proudly present him with Pompey's severed head and his signet ring, expecting Caesar to be thrilled.
But he wasn't.
No. Instead, Caesar reportedly bursts into tears. Pompey was his enemy, but he was also a fellow Roman, his former son-in-law, and one of the greatest men in the Republic.
Right. To see him murdered by foreign advisors was a profound insult to Roman dignity.
But then, Caesar does something that has always puzzled me. He has just effectively won the Civil War. He needs to get back to Rome to establish order. But instead, he takes a massive months-long detour in Alexandria.
He gets heavily involved in local politics.
Right. He arbitrates a civil war between the teenage King Ptolemy and his sister Cleopatra. He sides with Cleopatra, ends up besieged in the royal palace by Ptolemy's army, fights a brutal urban war in the streets of Alexandria, has a famous affair with Cleopatra resulting in a son named Caesarion, and stays for the better part of a year.
It's a huge distraction.
Was this actually strategic necessity, or did the greatest general in the world just get hopelessly distracted by a charismatic queen and the staggering luxury of the Ptolemaic court?
It's easy to write it off as romance, but it was actually a complex mix of logistical reality, financial desperation, and cold political calculation.
Explain the logistics part.
First, historical records note he arrived at the exact wrong time of year. The Etesian winds, these strong seasonal winds blowing south across the Mediterranean, made sailing a fleet north out of Alexandria nearly impossible for several months.
So he was physically stuck there.
He was physically stuck. Second, the finances. Rome's treasury was depleted from the war, Caesar was still heavily leveraged, and Egypt was the wealthiest nation in the Mediterranean.
He desperately needed their grain and their gold.
Exactly.
Okay, but why side with Cleopatra?
That was the political calculation. By installing Cleopatra on the throne, someone who owed her entire position to him and who bore his child, he secured Egypt as a compliant, incredibly wealthy client state without having to formally annex it into the empire.
Why not annex it?
Because annexing it would have required leaving thousands of expensive Roman troops behind to garrison it. It was actually a highly efficient geopolitical move, albeit wrapped in a very dramatic romance.
That makes a lot of sense. So after he finally breaks the siege and leaves Egypt, he has to march north to Asia Minor to put down a sudden revolt by a king named Pharnaces.
Right, he's just putting out fires everywhere now.
But he crushes the revolt so fast at the Battle of Zila that he sends a deeply arrogant 3-word message back to the Senate to report the victory. Veni vidi vici.
I came, I saw, I conquered.
It's the ultimate PR spin, purposefully downplaying the fact that Pompey had spent years fighting in that exact same region.
Always controlling the narrative.
But there is a crucial difference in how Caesar operates during the Civil War compared to how Sulla operated 30 years prior.
Yes. This is one of the most important aspects of Caesar psychology. Remember Sulla's prescription lists?
The mass executions of political rivals.
Right. Caesar took the exact opposite approach. He instituted a policy of clementia clemency.
How did that work?
Whenever he defeated a Roman army, he refused to execute the captured senators and officers. He pardoned them. He forgave men who had actively tried to kill him, including prominent figures like the great orator Cicero and a young idealist named Marcus Junius Brutus.
That seems incredibly merciful for an ancient warlord. Why do it?
Well, it wasn't just mercy, it was weaponized psychology. Clemency was a potent propaganda tool. He wanted to cultivate gratitude and obligation rather than fear.
He wanted to be loved, not feared.
He was drawing a sharp, deliberate contrast between himself and the vengeful dictators of the past, like Sulla. He wanted the narrative to be that he was the merciful savior of the Republic, not its butcher.
That's smart.
But on a deeper level, pardoning an aristocrat was a way of establishing absolute dominance. By giving a senator his life, Caesar was proving that he owned that life. It completely stripped these proud men of their dignity.
Because now they owe him everything. And that weaponized clemency is exactly what ends up getting him killed. Because, having conquered his rivals abroad in Africa and Spain, Caesar returns to Italy. But he doesn't return as a traditional consul.
No, he doesn't.
He returns as something the Republic hasn't seen in centuries. In early 44 BC, he is appointed dictator, perpetua dictator for life.
And we have to understand what that meant. Up until this point, the Roman dictatorship was a constitutional emergency office. You were appointed for 6 months to fight a war or manage a crisis, and then you laid the power down.
Right, it was supposed to be temporary.
Sulla had held it longer, and Caesar himself had held it for short stints to force through elections, but declaring it perpetual fundamentally broke the core tenet of the Republic. That power must be temporary and shared.
He immediately launches into sweeping administrative changes. And frankly, when you look at it, a lot of it is objectively good governance.
Oh, he was a very effective administrator.
He introduces the Julian calendar.
Yes, and the mechanics of the calendar reform are fascinating.
How did it work before him?
The old Roman calendar was lunar, which meant it was out of sync with the solar year. Politicians were supposed to insert extra intercalary months to keep the seasons aligned, but during the chaos of the civil wars, they just stopped doing it.
Too distracted by fighting.
Right. So by the time Caesar took over, the calendar was off by nearly 3 months. The harvest festivals were happening before the crops were even planted.
That's a mess.
It was. Caesar brings in Alexandrian astronomers, switches to a 365-day solar calendar, and adds a leap year. It was a massive, stabilizing administrative feat that we basically still use today.
He also restructures debt, which was causing riots in the streets. He reduces the massive grain dole, the free welfare grain given to citizens to balance the state budget. He cuts the recipient list from 320,000 down to 150,000.
Very bold economic moves.
And he dramatically expands the Senate, flooding it with his own supporters, increasing the membership from 600 to 900.
This was the real power play.
When I look at all these moves, the analogy that jumps to mind is a hostile corporate raider taking over a publicly traded company.
Oh, that's interesting. Expand on that. How does the raider analogy fit his governance?
Well, when a hostile raider takes a company private, they don't necessarily want to tear down the factories or fire all the workers, right?
Yeah.
They might even streamline operations and fix the accounting, like Caesar did with the debt and the calendar. But what the raider does want is to completely defang the board of directors.
Ah, I see.
By adding 300 new loyal senators, Caesar is essentially issuing millions of new shares of stock to his friends, instantly diluting the voting power of the activist shareholders, the old aristocracy.
That is brilliant.
He keeps the title of the Senate, but turns it into a rubber stamp for his own executive orders.
That analogy perfectly captures the structural reality. The historian Ernst Badian argued this point brilliantly. He said Caesar had no overarching master plan for basic constitutional reform. He didn't build a new system.
He just hijacked the old one.
Right, he merely grafted himself as an ill-fitting head onto the body of the traditional republican structure. He monopolized the old machinery rather than replacing it.
And the honors he accepted while doing this were just rubbing salt in the psychological wounds of the traditional elite.
He didn't hold back.
He allowed his face to be put on circulating coins. He was the first living Roman to ever have that happen. That was an honor reserved for gods and dead ancestors.
Very sacrilegious to a traditional Roman.
They renamed the month of Quintilis to July. He was granted the right to wear a purple royal dress and sit on an elevated golden chair in the Senate House.
You really have to deeply consider the psychological toll this took on the Roman aristocracy.
It must have been infuriating.
We talked about dignitas earlier. The entire purpose of a Roman senator's life was competitive political honor. You competed fiercely for elections, you vied for military commands, you fought for the right to speak first in debates.
It was a game they all played.
Yes. By monopolizing all decision-making and hoarding all the honors, Caesar stripped the aristocracy of their very reason to exist. Their dignity was completely compromised because any office they held, any command they received, was no longer won through the traditional grace of the people. It was handed down as a personal favor from Caesar.
There weren't statesmen anymore. They were just his employees.
Exactly.
Which leads to the infamous Lupercalia incident in February of 44 BC. Caesar is sitting on a rostrum watching the festival. His right-hand man, Mark Antony, runs up and repeatedly tries to place a royal diadem, a crown woven with white ribbon on Caesar's head.
A very loaded symbol.
Caesar publicly refuses it, waving it away, and the crowd cheers his refusal. But the intent is so murky.
It is deeply debated.
Was he testing the waters to see if the public was ready for a king and backed down when they didn't cheer? Or was it a staged piece of theater to prove to his paranoid enemies that he didn't want to be a king?
We will never know for sure what was in his mind, but politically the damage was irreversible. Because the rumor that he wanted to be a monarch was crystallized into a visual spectacle. And to a Roman, the word rex king was toxic. It was the ultimate political taboo.
Right.
Transforming his dictatorship into one for life, combined with the visual symbols of monarchy, clearly signaled to his contemporaries that no free republic could ever be restored as long as he drew breath.
Which takes us to the most famous political murder in human history, the Ides of March and the Fall of the Man.
The climax of the story.
A conspiracy rapidly forms, eventually growing to around 60 senators. The ringleaders are Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Junius Brutus. And what's wild to me is the makeup of this group.
It is surprising.
It's not just the old Pompeians who Caesar had pardoned. The conspiracy contains a substantial number of Caesarians, guys who had fought alongside him in the muddy trenches of the Gallic Wars, men who had crossed the Rubicon with him like Decimus Brutus and Gaius Trebonius.
His own guys.
Why are his own most loyal lieutenants turning on him?
Because they hit the glass ceiling. They supported him in the Civil War because they wanted wealth and position. But under a dictator perpetuo, they realized they would never truly be independent political actors. They might get a magistracy because Caesar liked them, but they would never be his equals. They wanted the old competitive game back.
What about Brutus?
Brutus, in particular, was under immense psychological pressure. He claimed direct descent from Lucius Junius Brutus, the legendary founder of the Republic, who had violently driven the last kings out of Rome centuries earlier.
The pressure to live up to that name must have been intense. But wait, let's look at the broader picture here. It wasn't just the elite plotting in back rooms, right? There was genuine public anger brewing, too.
Oh, absolutely.
People were leaving graffiti on the statues of Brutus's ancestors, writing things like, "Would that you were alive today." How does the ultimate populist general, the guy who literally threw the biggest parties, conquered Gaul, and forgave debts, lose the favor of the actual working class people?
It's a vital point that gets overlooked in all the Shakespearean drama. The public backlash was real, and it was rooted in policy.
Policy like what?
Well, Caesar's debt policies, while helpful to some, ultimately favored lenders and property owners to keep the Roman economy from completely crashing.
Right.
When working-class protesters and radicals agitated for total debt forgiveness and rent strikes, Caesar's subordinates in the city used lethal military force to crush those protests.
So he turned the military on the mob.
Furthermore, he reduced the grain dole, cutting off the food supply for tens of thousands of urban poor. He abolished the civic associations, the collegia, which the lower classes relied on for localized political organization.
He took away their unions, basically.
Yes. And most crucially, he essentially abolished open competitive elections by pre-selecting all the candidates himself. The people lost their ancient fundamental right of decision.
So they realized he was just another tyrant?
The mob realized they were just as alienated and marginalized by his autocracy as the wealthy Senate was.
So the pot is completely boiling over on all fronts. March 15th, 44 BC, the Ides of March. Caesar wakes up, and according to the lore, there are bad omens everywhere.
Classic Roman history.
His wife Calpurnia begs him not to go. He dismisses his personal bodyguard. He reportedly ignores a warning scroll handed to him in the street.
He walks right into it.
He walks into the Senate meeting, which was temporarily being held in the Curia of Pompeii, part of a massive theater complex built by his dead rival, because the regular Senate house in the Forum had burned down.
The irony is incredible.
He walks in, takes his seat on his golden chair, right at the foot of the statue of Pompey. The conspirators surround him under the guise of presenting a petition. They pull daggers from under their togas. He is stabbed 23 times, fighting back briefly before pulling his toga over his face and falls dead, literally bleeding out on the pedestal of Pompey's statue.
Let's examine the fundamental philosophy behind this assassination because it reveals why it was doomed to fail from the start.
Why was it doomed?
The conspirators framed the murder entirely as tyrannicide. They proudly called themselves the liberators. They genuinely believed they were acting in defense of liberty.
But they misunderstood the situation.
They fundamentally misunderstood the situation they were in. They thought that by simply killing the dictator, the Republic would magically reset and restore itself to its former glory.
Just flip the switch back.
Exactly. What they failed to realize was that the Republic they wanted to save was already dead. The institutions had been hollowed out by decades of corruption, political violence, and the shift of military loyalty from the state to individual generals.
The assassins thought they were removing a tumor to save the patient, but the patient had been dead for 20 years.
Exactly right.
By killing Caesar, they didn't restore the Constitution. They merely triggered a chaotic, terrifying power vacuum.
Yeah.
The assassins march out of the theater, holding their bloody daggers up, expecting the citizens of Rome to carry them on their shoulders in celebration.
But that's not what happens.
Instead, the streets are silent. The public is terrified. People bar their doors. And then, days later, comes Caesar's public funeral.
Which changes everything. Mark Antony, Caesar's surviving co-consul, delivers a masterful, highly inflammatory funeral speech.
He whips the crowd into a frenzy.
He displays Caesar's bloody, pierced toga to the crowd, but the real turning point is when he reads Caesar's will aloud.
Because Caesar didn't hoard his wealth, did he?
No. He left a generous cash inheritance to every single citizen in Rome, and he donated his massive private gardens across the Tiber to the public as a park.
It's the ultimate posthumous PR move. The crowd realizes the tyrant actually cared for them more than the aristocratic liberators ever did.
And the mourning turns into a violent riot.
They tear apart benches and market stalls to build a massive funeral pyre right in the center of the Forum. The assassins are forced to flee the city in terror for their lives.
They completely lost control of the narrative.
Adding to the sheer mythic weight of the moment, a few months later, during games held in Caesar's honor, a bright comet appears in the sky for 7 straight days.
Caesar's comet.
Right. The Romans take it as a literal, undeniable sign from the heavens that Caesar has been deified. He is now Divus Iulius, the divine Julius.
But the biggest political shock of the will wasn't the money given to the public.
What was it?
It was the revelation that he had adopted his obscure 18-year-old great-nephew Gaius Octavius as his primary heir, leaving him the bulk of his estate and, crucially, his name.
No one saw that coming.
No one, especially not Mark Antony, saw that coming.
This teenager suddenly inherits the name Caesar, the vast wealth and the loyalty of the veteran legions. This kicks off another 13 years of brutal, exhausting civil war.
It never ends.
Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus form the Second Triumvirate. And this one is an actual legal dictatorship. They issue their own proscription lists, purging thousands of enemies, including Cicero.
A total bloodbath.
They hunt down Brutus and Cassius and defeat them at Philippi.
Right.
And then, inevitably, they turn on each other. Octavian eventually defeats Antony and Cleopatra at Actium and returns to Rome to become Augustus, the first true emperor of Rome.
And that is Caesar's true, lasting political legacy.
He paved the way.
He didn't build the empire himself, but his actions ensured the permanent death of the Republic. He established the political concept of Caesarism, which is a system of charismatic, strongman rule based on raw military power, a potent cult of personality, and direct popular support that entirely bypasses traditional legal institutions.
His very name, Caesar, was adopted as a title of absolute authority for millennia.
It became Kaiser in German, Tsar in Russian.
For 2,000 years after his death, there was almost always a head of state somewhere in the world bearing his name.
It is an incredible legacy.
It's wild that we still use words derived from his name today. But when you look past the marble statues and the geopolitical legacy, there are some fascinating, very human, personal quirks that the historical records give us.
Oh, he had a lot of quirks.
For instance, there was the long-standing debate over his health. Ancient writers like Plutarch and Suetonius explicitly state he suffered from seizures, which they called the falling sickness epilepsy.
Right.
But modern medical historians debate this endlessly. Some argue his symptoms align more with cardiovascular issues, perhaps a series of mini-strokes toward the end of his life.
Which would make sense given his age and stress.
And there's even a bizarre yet medically plausible theory that he contracted a parasitic brain infection from a tapeworm during his time in Egypt.
That is horrifying.
Right. He was also incredibly sensitive about his receding hairline. He apparently combed his thinning hair aggressively forward from the crown, and he loved the privilege of wearing the laurel wreath purely because it hid his bald spot.
Just a normal, vain guy.
How did a guy with these very human physical vulnerabilities, a comb-over, and all those persistent rumors maintain this aura of complete godlike invincibility?
I think we have to look at those vulnerabilities not as weaknesses, but as the engine of his relentless, almost frantic drive.
Drive to prove himself.
Yes. The cardiovascular theory, the idea that he might have been suffering mini-strokes in his 50s, could explain his incredible manic urgency during his dictatorship.
Because he was passing laws constantly.
In those final months, he was passing complex legislation at a breakneck pace, initiating massive engineering and building projects across the empire, and preparing for massive new wars. He operated like a man who knew he was running out of time, desperate to cement his structural changes before his physical body failed him.
That paints a very different picture of him.
Furthermore, we have to acknowledge how our modern perception of him is shaped. Our view is heavily filtered through the intentional PR machine of Augustus.
Right, because Augustus needed him to look perfect.
Exactly. Augustus desperately needed Caesar to be perceived as an infallible, flawless god, so that Augustus could legally style himself as Divi Filius, the son of a god. We are still, in many ways, reading Caesar's own carefully crafted publicity, which was then amplified and set in stone by the emperors who followed him.
So, to summarize the sheer density of this man's life, he permanently altered the trajectory of Western civilization.
Unquestionably.
He achieved this through a potent mix of unparalleled military genius, a complete willingness to take on ruinous amounts of personal debt, an absolute mastery of public relations, and a terrifyingly clear-eyed view of how power actually worked.
He saw reality, not the illusion of the Republic.
He proved historically that when the vital institutions of a state are weakened by extreme, unyielding partisanship, and when the wealthy elite refuse to compromise for the public good, a charismatic leader with a loyal base and an army can just walk in and take the whole thing.
It is a sobering, enduring lesson on the extreme fragility of constitutional norms and the illusion of permanent stability.
And that leads me to a final provocative thought to leave you pondering. If Caesar hadn't been assassinated on the Ides of March, he was scheduled to leave Rome just 3 days later.
Right, he was going to war.
He was embarking on a massive, multi-year military campaign against the Parthian Empire in the east to avenge the death of Crassus. If he had gone, if he had avoided the daggers and lived, would the Roman Republic have slowly died a quiet, bureaucratic death under the shadow of a perpetually absent dictator?
It's a fascinating what if.
Or was a violent rupture, a bloody assassination of the Senate, and another decade of civil war the only way the Roman Empire could finally be born? Keep questioning the history you think you know, because as we saw today, the earthquake that brings down the house is usually just the final visible result of years of invisible rot. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.